Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Matt speaking, and as usual, I'm here with our co-hosts.
This is Gil.
And this is Jason.
And this week we are bringing in a guest host, one of my closest, dearest, and most cherished friends, Andrew. So, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and give everybody a hello?
Hi guys, thanks for having me on. Super excited to talk to you today, and this is going to be a ton of fun.
Yay.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that Andrew is the reason really that we started this podcast because our first episode, Tenant, was based on a discussion we had online, and Andrew said you should really record this so we can all enjoy the conversation, and that's how this all started.
I really prefer to think myself as the inspiration behind the podcast, but I'll take reason too.
You don't want too much of the blame. For sure.
Oh, we might as well just call you the catalyst. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
I mean that's just the objectively correct word, right? Catalyst. But anyway, this time around we are talking about Darren Aronofsky's 2006 film, The Fountain. I have my own opinions, and I'm going to open the floor to everybody else before I interject. Andrew, why don't you go first? Because you're our guest, and you should set the stage.
Awesome. I'm really glad to go first, in fact, because I think the context in which we see movies sometimes is super important. And seeing The Fountain was actually one of my most favorite times ever going to see a movie in a theater. Just to kind of put it into context, Matt and I went to go see it like on a random Saturday night, went to go see it at some rinky-dinky independent theater. And that's one of the nice parts about like being close to Matt is you find yourself going to see movies that you would never normally experience, and it's just nothing better to do. Matt has his ideas like, hey, I heard about this, let's go check it out. And so you have the bromance thing going on there, and we wind up at this seeing this incredible movie that's really just an emotional gut punch and roller coaster of a ride. And I remember it was actually raining throughout the entire movie. So we had the benefit of having that additional soundtrack while the whole thing was going on. And it was really cool because like walking out of the movie, I think Matt and I were both kind of stunned a little bit, for our own reasons, and just taking a moment to breathe in that fresh air that was just accentuated by the rain. It just made for like a really, really beautiful experience. So I definitely have a lot of love for this film. I definitely understand some of the criticisms behind it, but it's definitely one of my favorites, especially because it's a theme that makes me very emotional. And I just think it's just an absolute beautiful, beautiful, tiny little film.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's what's interesting about it because it came out in a period that we were all in film school, and there was that sense that all of us was in that pretentious mode of we want to try and be into art house movies or indie movies or interesting movies, things like that. And I think this one was definitely one of those like polarizing one that when it came out, the people who liked it really loved it, and the people who disliked it thought that the people who liked it were just pretentious assholes and didn't really like it. They just wanted to seem smart by liking it. It's one of those movies that I did say, wow, we need to do it on the podcast at some point. And I was so happy that Andrew brought it up because we can give it the four panelist treatment and get more opinions for sure. Because I wonder if me, Matt, and Jason will be, fairly close in our assessment. But I guess that's remains to be seen.
I'm glad that you said it and not me, because when I saw The Fountain in theaters, I really loved it. And I was like, whoa, oh my gosh. I even remember going to school the next day and talking to a bunch of people about it and just kind of like discussing what our thoughts were, what we thought was going on in certain parts of it, stuff like that. Over the years, I've probably seen it 3 more times, including tonight, just an hour ago. I do think my opinion has dropped of it, but probably not as low as I would assume some of yours or Matt's, maybe, perhaps. But as you said, we'll see when we go deeper into this. I think it's pretty good. It's just it's got some issues. I think it's far from his best, Aronofsky's best film. So that's kind of my surface take on it.
Yeah, I guess I'll say my reaction to it this time around before I let Matt go is that because we're talking about our memory of it from back then, but this time around I agree. You see the intention, you see that this is a really good filmmaker. I wouldn't say a master filmmaker. He's made some really good movies, but I don't put it in the upper echelon of modern masters. I think he's close to it, but he's had too many misses. It's just mainly I think like 2-3 movies that are like really really good. But yeah, it's tough. He's tough, but I think he's extremely talented. But it's almost odd how he just made so many wrong decisions with this movie. Like you see it while it's all smart, it's all calculated, but it's all too much, all over the place, too much. And you wonder if maybe that's what it was supposed to be. But like you said, we can get into it in the second part of the discussion with spoilers and everything. But I really wanted to, like we often do in these episodes, like when I watch a movie that I've disliked before, I'm trying to look for what's good about it. And if I watch a movie that I love, I'll try to look for the flaws because we're trying to refresh our view about it and be as objective as possible. But yeah, it was just very tough. It was too many issues. But I saw the talent. The talent was there. The look was great. The music is amazing. But yeah, it's too many problems. Yeah.
Okay, so have all of us gone to one of those like late night planetarium shows where they do like a laser show and it's set to like Pink Floyd or some other kind of awesome rock music or something like that?
I've never been to anything like that before. I've been to those things where they project the stars up onto the ceiling. Totally
Okay,
not
so
what you're talking about.
all right, so yeah, you don't know what I'm talking about, but
I know what you're talking about. I've never been.
He can imagine. He has he has imagination.
you're right. You can imagine it. As far as I'm concerned, the fountain is basically like a 10 out of 10 version of one of those planetarium shows where you're just like back there in your seat and you're seeing a bunch of really psychedelic, awesome images, and it's set to really awesome music, and it's just washing over you. It's just gorgeous, and I mean, it's a feast for the eyes and the ears, and it especially if you see it on a big screen, it's just engulfing you. You feel like you're inside of this world, and then you come out of it and you are not at all regretful that you spent an hour and a half watching it. And still, when you look back upon it, it's really lacking a lot of soul, a lot of actual substance. And there are a lot of logical problems. There are a few ham sandwiches, but there is no getting around the fact that this is a movie that is just amazing to look at and to listen to and to experience. So, like, I mean, it's one of those things where I can't actually think of a movie in which like there are more flaws that I can point to that I would still just say, look, just go see this movie because you know, it will just fuck your mind with how beautiful the visuals and the sound is. It doesn't matter. Like just experience it. It doesn't matter that this movie has so many flaws. It's just gorgeous. Just experience it. Just subject yourself to it. Yeah, we can deal with all the flaws later. Just experience the movie.
So that's a recommend.
Yeah, I guess you do recommend it on some level then. Well, what's your rating? I guess we can get into that.
Am I starting? I guess
Let's start with Matt.
Okay, 7.5.
Wow, that's pretty good. Okay.
It's a beautiful movie.
Yeah, I guess it's that beautiful.
It's a freaking cinegasm.
It's kind of like a Tarkovsky thing. It's like you liking Tarkovsky movies because it's very like cinematographically, like, but not story wise. So this is like you're giving a pass because of the cinematography. Like you would rate it like a 5 or a 6 if it wasn't for the look of the movie.
It's not just the look; it's the sound. I mean, it's
sound,
the editing, like the actual craft of it. I mean, how do you not watch that movie and not get a boner at some point?
Wow.
Yeah, no, and by the way, I'm not. I've also rated poop movies slightly higher for one reason or another. So I'm not putting that down. I'm just asking if that's some of the reasoning because you seem to say
just want clarification. Flaws. That's all.
Yeah. Like I think it's a legit reason if you have like a strong affection for a movie, whether it's the plot, certain characters in it, or just the music. Yeah, there's no doubt. I remember, like we said at some point, that this is a candidate for like probably the best music ever in a subpar movie or something like that. Yeah. It's probably one of the top 10 scores of all time, but in a top 10,000 movie. Top 1,000 movie, maybe.
No, I mean, if they do a re-release of this in a planetarium or in an IMAX theater or something like that, and they're charging $17 for it, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I mean, like
IMAX. Yeah.
I mean, preferably I would be on weed or something, but yeah. But yeah, I would totally go. Anyway.
Well, what about you, Andrew?
Well, I actually rated very close with Matt. I mean, I think I'm more at an 8 because like of the experience I had when I first saw it. You have Matt cinegasm me right next to me like the whole time. That adds a little something to
multiple
it.
Multiple cinegasms.
Multiple times, because that is, I mean, it is. I think the way Matt described it was really good in the sense that it's an experience, and I think it's quite an emotional experience, and I think that's part of where it was very strong for me. Where it probably is one of the biggest flaws in the movie is that it is just so entwined with just one main emotion. But I mean, there's so many good things about it that I love. The music, of course, being extraordinary. The special effects were just incredible. And I think timeless as well. And then the acting, this isn't something that hasn't been mentioned yet, but Hugh Jackman is just incredible in the movie. He just is so good with this obsessive characters that he plays sometimes where he just really just is kind of going nuts throughout the course of the movie. And it just adds to it. I think it really makes it profound for me. So I'd say a solid 8.
I'm just listening to your story, thinking about like what it's like, seeing a movie with Matt, but then of course, like in my head, exaggerating it because Matt's very fond of telling and retelling a story that of him going to a really terrible movie with his ex-girlfriend and her coming out of the movie telling him that she could tell exactly when he was getting pissed off at the movie because she would be squeezing her hand really hard. And I'm just like picturing Andrew in a crowded movie theater next to Matt, and he's just like enjoying the movie, but like right next to him, I'm just picturing Matt just being like, "Oh God, yeah!"
Yeah, I believe.
Which is not something Matt does. I just in my head, it makes the story better to think of it that way.
Yeah, he's not a screamer. He's
Yeah.
genuinely enjoys.
When I think about the movie overall, I think about it as like a, or like, let me rephrase that. When I think about Aronofsky's movies and I think about how what I thought about this movie and everything, coming on the heels of Requiem for a Dream makes me want to give this movie like a rating of like a 6 or something, just because I love that movie so much and I had huge high expectations for this movie, and I did really like it when it came out. I just, as I've said, over time it kind of went down. I don't think it's fair to go quite that low. I'd probably say like the 6.5 is probably how I feel about it.
Oh, so right now you're a 6.5?
Yeah, 6.5, 7, somewhere in there. I hadn't really thought about it until you actually said brought up the grading thing, which is something I always forget to think about ahead of time.
Well, that's okay. It's part of the show to just kind of off the cuff. We just saw the movie, so you should presumably give a verdict. Yeah. No, so for me, I guess I'm a bit more extreme. This movie, and like you said, after Requiem for a Dream, the expectations were pretty much as high as it can get, and it really broke my heart. It's kind of like Inception after The Dark Knight. Like it's just The Dark Knight was close to a perfect movie. Requiem for a Dream was close to a perfect movie, and then a very imperfect movie follows. More so with this, I would say, than Inception. I rated it a 4 back then. Like my rating on IMDb from back when was a 4, and I think it was mostly an emotional and the reverse to what Matt was doing. I really thought that there was a sin to have these images and this music and give such a poor characterization of the cast, like the characters, the dialogue, the plot lines, even the homages were like, I don't know, felt a bit too heavy-handed. But which we'll get into in the second part. And it's so sad, because of like what this movie was trying to be like, and it's so not. It's so not. And it's okay. He was doing his own thing, but listening to all of you and seeing it again and appreciating the good aspects of it, I need to give it a 5. Like I need to not be too brutal with it, because I do feel like there's value to it for sure. Yeah. I'm not sure if I would go as far as like what Matt is saying, because like not everybody's gonna like watch a movie just for visuals and music. But if you're a cinematographer or if you're a composer, yes, you should watch this movie. If you're just a casual movie watcher, I don't think neither of those things are gonna make the movie a better experience for you. Yeah, that's kind of like my verdict.
Yeah. Where do you guys, not to get super deep into this, because I know that this is usually a black hole for us, but where do you place this on Aronofsky's filmography ranking?
Yes, so I can start. So we said The Requiem for a Dream, I think it's probably his best movie. The Wrestler is a very, very good movie. I know borderline, just in a different way, as good as Requiem for a Dream, but I do think there's just less going on there. It's a very different movie. I definitely need to rewatch Black Swan. I actually want us to do an episode of it, because when I watched it in theaters, I've only watched it once in theaters, and there was a fire alarm in the middle of the movie, and we had to go out and come back to restart the movie. So it was like a so-so experience, but I did feel it was better than The Fountain. Not as good as The Wrestler, better than The Fountain. I believe I'm not crazy about Pi, but it's probably slightly better than The Fountain. And I guess Mother has to squeeze somewhere in there. I think Mother was a better attempt at what he was trying to do with The Fountain, to go really out there, but he was more mature as an artist. So I think Mother would fall like after Black Swan, probably. Right. And then from Black Swan, I do wonder. I actually like Noah. I know that people think it's a very flawed movie, but I think Noah is better than The Fountain. So that's my order. Like, like Requiem for a Dream, The Wrestler, Black Swan, Mother, Noah, maybe Pie, and the Fountain, if that's all.
Okay. Andrew, sorry, Andrew, do you want to come in or?
Sure. Because for me, I actually haven't seen all of his films, so it'll be a little easier for me to do it. I've only seen Requiem for a Dream once. I never want to watch that movie again. It's just
Understandable.
this
I,
whole thing.
It's a rough
yeah,
movie.
yeah, not going to put you down for that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I watched Black Swan before once, and I don't remember it very much at all. And then The Wrestler is very near and dear to me because I'm a massive pro wrestling fan. So that one was also very difficult to watch. So it's hard for me because I love The Fountain. It's my favorite out of anything that I've seen from him, but I do acknowledge its flaws. So like ranking those is tough. I definitely think The Wrestler from like a movie perspective, as far as quality of how well it made, is better, and probably Requiem for a Dream is better too. But I can't go there.
We all go where we need to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Jason.
Mine started out. I was really like surprised that mine started out so similar from Gil's, and then it veered in an entirely different direction.
It's part of the fun.
I think Requiem and The Wrestler are his two best movies. I've only seen The Wrestler twice and Requiem maybe 3 or 4 times. But for me, it's really similar to how I feel about, like we talked about before, with Michael Mann, with like Heat and Last of the Mohicans. I'll see one and then I'll be like, that's the best one. And then I'll see the other one and I'm like, no, what was I thinking? That's the best one. You know, I just go back and forth with it depending on what I've seen more recently. But I do love both of those movies a lot. They're easily his best two. I do think that Black Swan is his third best for sure. And I think that there's it stands out above the rest. You know, I think that there's a pretty big gap in quality after Black Swan. Pie and The Fountain are so different, I think, as movies. But in terms of quality, I'd say they're right around the same. If I were to rewatch Pie, there's a chance I might think it's better than The Fountain. But as of right now, I'd say they're about the same, taking up 4th and 5th. And then a significant drop below that, I would put Noah and Mother. I also, while I don't like Noah that much, I definitely could talk about it at some point in the future because I think there's things in that movie that are really, really good. It's just, I think the movie's a bit of a train wreck for very obvious reasons. And we don't even need to get into it, but it's just, I think the movie kind of fell apart and doesn't really work. So that's why I think it's so low on my list. But there's things in it that I really love, like the overall theme and just the story. There's something that he's trying to accomplish that I think he failed to accomplish, but I think it's admirable and great. Mother is something that I feel exactly the same way that Andrew does about Requiem for a Dream, and the same way I feel about Eraserhead. I really respect a lot of what's in Mother. I'm glad that I saw it, and I will never watch it again. I don't see any reason why I would ever want to subject myself to that ever again.
It's funny you should say that because I was actually was gonna suggest to do it as a double episode with Son of Soul. That'd be a brutal,
I would love to do
double
that.
feature.
I don't know if I would love to, but I'd probably partake in it at least.
Let's space it out. Let's give Jason a few months before we even consider that, just so you can.
That's my ranking would be so like that. I think there's a tier of Requiem and Wrestler, then a little bit below that, well, significantly below that, Black Swan, then a big drop to Pie and the Fountain, and then another pretty big drop to Noah and Mother.
Okay, so my turn. So the funny thing with Darren Aronofsky's filmography for me has been that it's been, as far as I can tell, hit, miss, hit, miss. And as far as I'm concerned, Pie is a hit. And I mean, yeah, it has its flaws, but it was also made for like $60,000, and like it was an ultra low budget movie. It was, ambitious. It achieved what it wanted to achieve, and it was pretty damn good. It got attention. Requiem for a Dream, he knocked it out of the fucking park, and he knocked it out of the fucking park well enough that actually the budget for the fountain was originally supposed to be twice what it was when they actually shot it. And I think that his biggest problem with the fountain was the fact that he decided to shoot it when his budget was cut in half. And to my understanding, it was supposed to be like a 3-hour movie, and they cut it down to 90 minutes. Just take the lump, make something else, build up your clout, maybe make your 3-hour epic original story later when you have the resources and the time and everything that you need to actually make it the way that you have envisioned. The Wrestler is my favorite Darren Aronofsky movie. And it is because it kicked me in the gut so hard that I mean, like, there is one scene in that movie where Mickey Rourke is trying to reconcile with his daughter, and it's just gone. It's just done. And to this day, several viewings later, I cannot even look at the screen because I can't process the emotions that I'm having in that scene. I mean, it is just, it just rips my heart out.
It's a powerful scene.
Black Swan, it's actually, Black Swan is always going to have a special place in my heart because I was in pre-production on a not so much a horror film, but like a creepy film. When I saw that, and when I saw the movie, I came out of it and immediately called the director and said, "Okay, this is a template for what we're going for visually." And then the director saw the movie and said, "Yeah," and then we basically did we basically did that. Noah was a pile of garbage. Mother was weird because I actually saw it with my mother.
Your fault.
I just thought the symmetry there would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I thought Mother was actually pretty fucking good. So I guess if I'm going to do a ranking, I would do The Wrestler #1 because that movie hurts me more than any movie that I've ever seen ever, and I love being hurt by movies. Requiem for a Dream comes second because that hurts me just about as well as any other movie has hurt me. After that, I think it would be Black Swan, then Pie, then Mother, then The Fountain, then Noah.
I'm just
I don't
surprised you
remember.
have Pie ahead of The Fountain. I'm surprised about that.
That's something that I'm already grappling with. I might want to flip those later, but yeah,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, Pie was an okay movie, but yeah, whatever, $60,000-$70,000. But Nolan's $8,000 movie was better. So,
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to compare those, definitely.
yeah.
I'd watch Following over Pie any day.
Yeah, they're pretty similar as far as like the aesthetics, the age that they made them, and all the circumstances surrounding them. It's they're actually, even though they're very different styles.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That is a good comparison now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
If
exactly, but I just
no, but if I was visiting you in LA and the same night the Aero Theater was playing Pi and the Egyptian was playing Following, even if I had seen Following once or twice that year beforehand, I would still recommend we go see that instead of Pi.
Although I will say, if both had Q&As, I would go see Pi because I've never been to a Q&A with Aronofsky.
That's a good point, and we have been to a Q&A with
I'm just saying because you brought up this weird example, I might as well take it one step further.
and actually, and we saw Following with Christopher Nolan. So
yeah, no, that was a good Q&A.
Yeah. All right. Anyway,
it's good. So I guess we're good to go to spoilers. Any other thoughts as far as recommending? So it sounds like Matt and Andrew more so recommend than Jason and I.
I would do a soft recommend. I would recommend it if you're a completist and you want to watch all of Aronofsky's films. I'd recommend it if you're just curious about Aronofsky because you hear a bunch of people talking about what a great and controversial director he is, but you don't like R-rated films because I believe it's the only thing of his that's not a hard R, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know. I'd recommend it if you're a big Hugh Jackman fan. He's got a lot of great acting in it.
Yeah, I guess that could lead into the spoilers. Anybody else before going to spoilers?
Well, I would recommend it over just about anything in the MCU for the last like 5 years. So go for it. You know, like
there were data over there.
I mean,
in case anyone is interested to know, as Matt is saying that, my eyes are rolling back into my head so hard that it actually hurt, and my hand instinctively started making the masturbation symbol because I just hear it from him so much. But anyway, sorry.
I think that points should be given for ambition, even if the reach exceeds the grasp. It was trying to do something. The film was trying to do something. The filmmaker was trying to do something, and he fell short. And we should acknowledge that. But it's better to make a movie that doesn't achieve its goals than it is to make a movie that achieves its goals when the goal is to suck.
To suck?
Okay.
Okay. Well, one thing I should say before I forget is that, you were saying something in your rankings about the fact that he really should have waited on this movie and not do it right after his second very successful movie, because we often compared it to Kubrick not doing 2001 as his third movie. He made it as like his fifth movie or something, sixth. Like once he was so established and so beloved that he was like, okay, I can take some risks. Like I can.
Yeah.
So if he had done The Wrestler first and maybe even Black Swan, and then swung to the fences with The Fountain, he swung to the fences with Noah, and that was apparently very divisive as well. But that's for another discussion. So yeah, no, I think, and the funny thing is, even Noah is kind of a failure, even with his maturity as an artist. So maybe he would have never succeeded in making his 2001 successfully.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, like the bare challenges he had making the movie, because I was reading a little bit about it before we met tonight, and I read that Brad Pitt was originally attached to do the movie instead of Hugh Jackman when they had
Kate Blanchett.
when they had the larger budget, and then part of it the film was delayed so Kate Blanchett could have her child. It would definitely be a very different movie, because I do think Brad Pitt is an extraordinary actor. I think he's a little better, honestly, than Hugh Jackman. A bit more versatile. But there was a lot of setbacks to this movie. But part of the reason I think why he chose to do it when he did was because he did have a very big emotional attachment to it, and it is such a an emotionally charged and emotionally driven movie. I think it was just one of those things where he could really separate himself from the material to maybe repair some of the flaws that that we briefly touched on. So I think that's important to take into consideration.
Yeah, I don't know what you were reading, Andrew, but I read something about he wrote the script after his one of his parents died or something like that, or was getting close to dying or something.
Yes.
So maybe it was just a thing that he felt he really needed to do at the time.
Yeah, I believe it was they were diagnosed with cancer. They survived it, but it all stemmed from that.
Yeah, and and that, I gotta say that's the wrong reason to write a script, or at least like the way that he's conceived of it, especially if they survived.
Yeah, but I definitely think the Fountain, it just comes from such an emotional place for me. That's one of the reasons why I love it. But I also think it's also one of the reasons why it is flawed, because it is so built around emotion that it lacks the depth and complexity that really kind of hurt the movie overall. But maybe that's more of a spoiler sort of chat than a now chat.
Well, we're in the spoiler section.
We have a thing of like restarting several times. So I was gonna say, actually, because you said, Andrew, about Brad Pitt, which I agree would have been a better. I'm not sure. Rachel Weisz was actually, I think, probably the best performance in the movie, as well as the one from Requiem for a Dream. Darn it.
Jeez.
Ellen Bernstein.
Ellen Bernstein.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's pretty good.
Ethan Suplee's really good.
Who?
Never mind.
Ethan Suplee. Yeah,
Oh.
no, that was like one of his first big roles after he lost a ton of weight. So it was like really noticeable because it's the first time I remember seeing him being a smaller guy.
Oh, he's still pretty big compared to what he is now.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
piggybacking on the whole Brad Pitt thing, because I think that's where the biggest difference probably is between me and it sounds like all three of you. I'm not sure, but I think his performance is not that good, and I'm not saying that it's his fault necessarily. I think it's the script and the character and the setup that he was given. But even within that, I think he could have. Yeah, I think his performance is not that great in that movie. And I don't fault him for that. I think it's what it's called for. It's called for a lot of crying, a lot of emotion, but a bit more restrained there, like a bit more nuance. I get it, he's supposed to be obsessed, but I've seen better obsessed.
Well, how about in every single one of Aronofsky's films?
Exactly. Like you see, like who's his face performance in The Wrestler, Mickey Rourke. Very, very subdued performance, and he's known to be an iconic sort of like face and like this casual dude, but he's very nuanced in that movie. Yeah, definitely. Like it's surprisingly an unnuanced performance, even though I'm sure there's things to like about it, and maybe those are the parts that some of you like, and I just don't forgive it.
Just to clarify, I was chiming in to say that that every one of Aronofsky's films are in some way about obsession. So therefore, there's a performance to look for in all of those, and obviously, The Wrestler's a perfect example for you to go to because it's fantastic. But I do think just to clarify, I do think that I did like Hugh Jackman's performance in this. I kind of see what you're talking about in some of the scenes where he goes big, it gets close to almost melodramatic at points, but I think there's moments between him and Rachel Weisz, like in the bathtub and stuff, where I feel like it really brings it home for me.
Yes. They try. The humor helps. The humanity helps.
The snowballs.
The snowballs. Her performance is good. She's a solid, because this is when she was, I think it was not far from when she did The Constant Gardener and stuff. She was on a roll. Like she was just like
Constantine.
She couldn't give a bad performance. But she couldn't unfortunately salvage this relationship and this movie. Because I really feel like Hugh Jackman was just hamming it up left and right, like compared to her. And even her performance at times, I just think Aronofsky is just like, this is big. It's got to be big. Like, and, maybe like a Kubrick type of thing, or like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. But it's like, yeah, but the movie itself doesn't seem to fit those performances. And it is melodramatic completely. I think Matt admitted at some point in the past that it's basically the plot of a soap opera.
Yeah. Actually, okay, so we are in spoilers, right?
Yep.
Okay, so when Rachel Weisz's character Izzy dies, and they have that scene where Ellen Burstyn comes in, and it's like the moment that she's dying that she says, "Oh, you just found the cure." That is emotional blackmail in so many ways. I mean, like, it doesn't work. If you have a brain in your head when you're watching that scene, you're just kind of like, "Oh, fuck you. You're just playing with me." You know, that's not how things work. Even beyond that, if you just layer on the fact that it it wouldn't have even mattered if they had discovered the cure like the day before she died. It wouldn't have mattered if they had discovered the cure 6 months before she died. There would have had to have been like, there would have been like 6 years of FDA approvals before they would have allowed him to inject that into his wife. There is just no way. I mean, like, she was already dead from the moment that the movie started, and the character should have known that from the moment that the movie started. And I mean, I don't want to, turn this into a political conversation, but holy shit, there's just no way that scene makes any sense to anybody who knows anything about how healthcare works.
Well, he probably would have cheated. Like he probably would have like snuck it
Yeah.
into her before FDA approval.
Matt, I just wanted to throw this out there. You've brought this up to me in the past, and every time we've talked about this has been since the last time I saw it, which was when we all saw it together at Gil's house one time, but before today. So because you brought it up a couple of times, I was on the lookout for that scene this time.
Uh-huh.
And the moment it happened, I was like, oh no, this is what Matt was talking about. And I have to agree that this is my least favorite scene in the movie, because I agree with essentially what Matt's saying. I think that the aspect of the what you're saying, the fact that realistically they would have to go through all these trials and things like that, I think for the sake of the movie, we can kind of excuse that, because we've already seen this guy doing really reckless stuff that scientists and doctors should not be doing. Like, he's cutting corners left and right to show his obsession. This guy would have done something illegal. Like, he would have been, he would have like injected something dangerous into his wife to try and cure that thing. So I don't really think that's the problem. It's like you said, it's if they'd had her die and then Ellen Burstyn had come in later that day or the next day, even anything like that, the day of the funeral or something like that, it would have been like, wow, or even if they had done it the other way around, if he had found the cure and then like he goes and tells her about it, and there's this happy moment, but then she dies before he can get it to her. Anything like that would have still been preferable to what they did. The fact that she bursts in the door with this big flood of light behind her, and then she tells him, like, guess what? You cured death. And he literally turns around and runs to his dead wife. Like, come on. I have to agree. It's my least favorite scene in the movie.
Like everything there is a soap opera except for the lighting.
Right. And the lighting is really good.
I have like a rant and an alternative movie that could have been made better. But I was going to ask Andrew. I am curious, since you probably liked the movie the most. What were the aside from what we've mentioned, the flaws that you did see or acknowledge, especially this time around, maybe.
Well, I think the biggest problem is that it's very singular focus and it's very one note. It's all about just simply Hugh Jackman's obsession with avoiding death and his fear of death, and that's really like the perspective that shapes everything, whether regardless of what timeline they're in or what they're trying to do. Like he and Rachel Weisz's characters didn't really have a relationship. He was just like not there for her while she was dying, and then that's it. Everything is just really just structured around that, and I think because it is so simple that it doesn't really provide any sort of the complexity or nuance or subtext that you would expect from like a quality film.
Yeah,
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
no, for sure. And bringing Inception again, the way this movie broke my heart is with Inception, it was the power of ideas, and if you can implant ideas, you can change the world. And then it's a heist movie. This movie, it's about the fountain of youth. It's about ending death. These are big, big subjects. There is so much that you can get into here. You can go into meditation, becoming one with the universe. They even have like that moment in the end where he's like in the lotus pose, like the meditation pose. But none of that was set up at any point. He is the last person on earth that you would consider a sort of Buddha or a spiritual person that's reconnecting with the universe there in the end. Like this movie could have been so much better, could have like gone into so many avenues about like what's our place in the universe? Are we just, you know, biological robots walking in space, or are we an extension of the universe, almost like a limb of the universe, and this journey to connect with the universe and become immortal, kind of like the way it is in 2001, where you the next step in the evolutionary ladder. This could have been so much better. None of that is in the movie. We don't discuss it, not the ideas, not the. It's just I want to not die. That's all that you can say about death in life. You want to not die. That's just so shallow. And yeah, that's why it's got no soul, no depth. It's very little substance. And to me, if you want to solve the idea that he can't, the moment that he finds the cure, she's dead. For one thing, it's a problem that the character is even emotionally involved with someone who has cancer, and that's why he's a cancer researcher. Uninteresting. The most interesting about the character House from the show House is that he hates people, but he loves puzzles, like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And that's a way more interesting character. But if you can't go that route, because you need to have this idea of the connection between him and her, she needs to be dead. If she were to be dead in the present, and then all the flashbacks would be when she was still alive, and his obsession is, I lost my wife, I'm not going to let anybody else deal with death or grief. If that were to become his obsession and his life work because of the death of his wife, and then when he discovers the cure, you don't have that soap opera moment. Then you can build the whole thing from the book that she wrote before her death but didn't finish, and in the present when he finally finds the cure but doesn't know if he can really like make it happen. He has to wait 500 years to actually have the technology to implement that. He gets the idea with the seed and making her into a tree in the end and all that. It could have been a 9 or a 10. Like it could have been a great movie if like you were just like played around with the order of the pieces here and the characters and the timelines. It could have been so much better. And yeah, go into meditation, spirituality, connection to the universe. Great idea. None of it is in the movie.
It's fair.
Yeah, I mean, they even have the line in the movie, "Death is a disease." Like that's actually a line in the movie. Why
Yeah.
not actually explore that fully?
Yeah, like get into it. Just don't throw one line for
You're
sure.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that you're definitely on to something there, Gil, with the changing up the way that the story would have been told entirely from the beginning. But I don't mind her being alive because they chose to do the three different stories. I think that what you're talking about, though, or like what could have worked just as well, if not better, would have been to have a little more time in the future story, so that way there are flashbacks to when she's alive, kind of thing. Like, kind of structure it that way. But I'm just kind of splitting hairs here. Obviously, it's not really that different from what you just said. I don't want to get off topic here, but I literally just looked over at my wall of DVDs and just saw that I have this movie on DVD and had completely forgotten about it. And I subjected myself to watching this with a whole bunch of commercials. It was really bad. So I don't know. That might say something about the fact that I forgot that I even had this movie and didn't even bother looking because I was so sure I didn't have it. But yeah.
I think one of the things I wanted to add about Hugh Jackman's performance in the movie was something I did find compelling, but it's because I feel very much the same way like his character does about death. Like, it really freaks me out. So I think that's one of the reasons why the movie works so well with me. But it's interesting because he did this movie so closely to performing in The Prestige, which is, of course, Chris Nolan, where he has another very super obsessive character, but, that's more of a feud between him and Christian Bale and Magicians, but it's very similar performances where, you have that obsessive quality, but it's interesting to have those point of comparison because you do have a much more nuanced and wide range in The Prestige. But I thought it was interesting because they were so close together.
Huh.
I'd forgotten that's when that was made, but you're right.
Yeah, it's just about right. It was because Memento was 2000. Well, 2000 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in any case, yeah. One other thing I should say before I forget as far as comparing it, because this movie was basically kind of copying what Ikiru did with transitions, like match cut transitions, and there's even the one scene where he walks through the street and all the sounds are muted and then they kick in.
Yeah.
Directly stolen from Ikiru. And that movie is about death. It's about a guy getting cancer and about his journey. But it's a much more nuanced and interesting and better movie because the whole movie is about that. Like, the whole movie is about, you're going to die. What are you going to do about it? Like, why does it matter? What's the fear? What's the this? What's the that? You deal with all the spectrum of emotions. You're not just singularly, I want to stop death. I want to stop death. I want to stop death. I want to cry. I want to cry. I want to stop death. It's there's so much to say about that. And Ikiru does a very good job going through his relationship with his sons and this and that. Like, it's, and then all those transitions and everything just become like a nice little touch to otherwise a very, very good movie. Where here it feels like it's kind of like stealing from a master, but not for a worthy movie. At least it looked good.
I think that the movie is less about his obsession with trying to cure death. I mean, that is what it's about, but I think it's more specifically trying to say that the problem with his obsession of trying to steal or trying to cure death and prevent death in that manner is that he's obviously missing out on what little life he has with his wife. And that if he had just not necessarily given up, but had spent more time with her, then that would have been a better use of that portion of his life, kind of thing. And that I don't have any problem with that. I actually really like that message within the film. I think that it's a deceptively simple movie in that sense, because that's what I think it's about. My only real problem with it, because I think it does tell that story well, it's just that's all it has to offer. So, and even though it's only 90 minutes long, it feels like a 2.5-hour movie. Like, that's my issue with it, is that, like, once you've seen it once, you rewatch it, and if you know where the story's going, you know the good moments, you know what's coming, and you're like, oh, this is a good movie. Oh, I know this is a really good scene. Oh, I can't wait till we get to that part. And it's like, woof, we are taking our time getting there. And it's not like we're taking our time with a whole bunch of character development or a whole bunch of story or a whole bunch of anything. Like Andrew said, it's kind of one note, and it's not repetitive, but it's one note. and it's about what I just said, and it keeps hammering the same point home over and over and over, that this guy is missing out on what little life he has left with his wife, and it keeps happening because he keeps making breakthroughs. It's not like he's an idiot. Important things are happening in his life that he should be dealing with, but that's the point. And you could kind of, at least I think, you could probably make a really great movie about that in like 40 minutes. And this movie's like an hour and a half long.
So, if I may interject,
Sure.
there is a moment, like just before the star explodes, which actually, by the way, is scientifically incorrect. The star that they're referring to is not in a nebula, and it's not anywhere close to being a dying star. But anyway, uh, I mean, Hugh Jackman's inflection, at one point he says, "I'm gonna die." He does say, "I'm gonna die,"
Oh yeah.
just before the star explodes, but he doesn't say, "I'm gonna die" in a pessimistic way. He says it in a very joyous way, like as if he finally really understood, holy crap, this is not the end of the world. This is just this is something that I can finally embrace.
Yeah.
This is something that I can finally just
Accept.
experience. Expect and experience after all this time. And it's all in the inflection. "I'm gonna die." You know, like he's almost tearing up with joy with the knowledge that he's going to die.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that adds a little bit of important nuance to the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's a bit too subtle. It's it's a moment. It's an acting choice that passes something like he's come to terms with it. I hope that's the least that he can do in this movie, is like have some redemption for this character for being like a cranky, obsessed person. But to me, it's not enough. There's just not enough there. I remember, like, I think somebody in film school said, like, oh, the lotus pose and everything. So, it's about meditation and connection with the universe. But, like, that's a lot of stuff that I have to extrapolate from, like, one image. Like, why can't we set that up? Like,
Well, I wanted to ask you guys something because it's right about what Gil's talking about right now. So, kind of to pile on to what Gil's saying, but in a slightly different way. Gil, I believe you were just talking about what you feel the movie lacks in terms of communicating to us more on like a storytelling way and stuff like that. Like the big ideas are not really expressed super well or whatever. In the third portion of the movie, the bubble ship is what I believe a lot of people like to call it, which is taking place in the future. That stuff is so vague to me. What he's doing, why he's doing it, how he's doing it, when he's doing it. Everything about it is so unnecessarily vague that I had numerous conversations with people after this movie came out, where out of a group of 6 or 7 people discussing the movie, several people would be adamantly telling us that we were all wrong, and that stuff was all like in his head and was not actually supposed to represent any sort of physical thing that he was actually doing. And while I don't agree with that view, I think that the fact that people saw it that way, I think that's a failure in a way of that portion of the story, because I mean, like, it's only a 90-minute movie, I
Mhm.
feel like there's time to explore what's happening in that portion of his life a little bit more, not just the stuff that Gil's talking about, which of course would probably be the most important stuff to explore, like how his character has changed that much and things like that, and what he feels and why he's suddenly this enlightened type person. But also, like, I mean, what the heck is the big bubble? Is that a super space age like spaceship? If it is, can you give me a little something? Like, just give me something. Like, I one of the greatest things about science fiction is the technical aspect of things, and I live for that stuff. And there's like nothing at all.
Not only that, story-wise, he's cranky on the bubble. He is not an enlightened Buddha.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's supposed to be this shaven head future man. I guess he's got the wisdom of 500 years because he's cured death. And I guess they have the technology to fly in bubbles. But he is not any different in the bubble. He just has this mild realization right before death, which that could be a point that like maybe he needed death in order to come to terms with, with all the issues he's had. But I
But
would
we
think after
shouldn't have to
500,
make all these stretches.
yeah, like
Well,
you'd think 500 years of grief. Come on, I mean, like he would be tame a bit there. I don't know.
but see, that's why I don't think he's dealing with grief in that moment. I just think he's still dealing with fear. My interpretation is that the tree is dying, and he's traveling to go ahead and try to save the tree so that way he can stay alive. Like up until the climax of the film, he still hasn't accepted that he's going to die until he does in that moment. So it's still continuing along the same journey, still trying to prevent what we all know is going to come. But that's him still fighting. That's why he's not enlightened in those scenes.
So that's a good question. So was it? But the tree is her, right? Because there's the whole thing about planting a tree where someone dies and it
That's what I've
takes
always
on.
understood it to be. So, like I said, super vague.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, because you see the hair, like like the goosebumps and stuff. It's supposed to represent that there's a human soul in there, presumably hers, and this idea that like if they get to this cloud, they're gonna die and be reborn, and maybe reconnect with the universe on some level, which is good
I
stuff.
love the.
Yeah.
I really love
I
the
just
story.
wish it
I
would have
just
set up
want.
better.
Exactly.
Well,
I want it to be. It's so. The concept is there, and I want to be sure that that's actually what they're telling me. And I mean, maybe I'm just not reading enough into it. I don't know.
I mean, Jason, right? You brought up, the whole science fiction aspect, and I mean, at no point in the more than a decade since this movie has come out have I ever thought about this movie as being science fiction. I mean, it's fantasy. It is something that is is not supposed to really bind itself to our understanding of space and time and everything like that. I mean, if you think about it like a poem, I think that the entire sequence of Tom in the, bubble and everything, I mean, I always thought of it as just the end of Izzy's book. I always thought of it like that. I may be wrong. Darren Aronofsky may slap me up the side of the head someday and say, like, no, that was seriously supposed to happen. And Tom literally did find the cure for death, and he's literally going up there with his wife as a tree to revive her and everything like that. I, I could be wrong. I always interpreted uh, both the 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 conquistador story and the bubble story as just part of the novel.
Her novel.
Yeah,
See, and I'm okay with
no,
that.
no. I think that the ending of the novel is what he writes at the
Right.
end.
Well, yeah, but still, you're talking about that's
right. Yeah.
yeah. And
Uh,
I'm totally okay if that's what the story is trying to tell me. I think it's really unclear that that's what it is, though, and that's my problem.
Yeah, it's misleading for sure. Yeah, because if he did cure death, what do you do then? I'm assuming he's not gonna die, so he can live to be 500 years, and you can develop technology and all that. And one interpretation, maybe this is where Darren was clever, that you can interpret it both ways, and it works because maybe him doing that 100 years later is finishing the novel. Like maybe he never writes the actual chapter. Maybe when she said finish it, finish it, finish it, even in the bubble, it's him taking that action. So I think it's open to interpretation. You can interpret it as being just the last chapter in the book, and there's sequences before she tells him to finish it. So the whole bubble was in her story to begin with. It's not like he added it on after. And or at least at least, but maybe he made it a reality in real life because even in the bubble, she tells him finish it, finish it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with not knowing precisely what Aronofsky was expecting me to get from that portion of the movie. I just don't. I don't care. I just watched it. I got what I felt like I should have gotten out of it. And yeah, I mean, there are some questions, just like the top spitting at the end of Inception. Uh,
That one's a
only,
bit clearer than this one, but
Let's not get back into
yeah,
that.
no, I get into that. But that one actually was very clear. But I mean, depending on the point of view.
right. But actually, I find the fountain to be less frustrating when I talk to fans of the actual movie. I find the fountain to be less frustrating. I don't know. I mean, I think that there's I think that it's wrong to dwell on ambiguity because I think that ambiguity was kind of the point.
It
Oh no,
was.
I don't fault the movie for ambiguity. I fault the movie for lacking substance, like for having
Yeah,
very thin amount of substance. But ambiguity is fine with me.
yeah, fair enough.
And from what I read, it was an intentional choice. Like he envisioned for that to be open to interpretation. So it definitely was an artistic choice for people not to necessarily have the answers as to what was going on in that particular scene. I definitely think the ending was meant to be cathartic, to be all about acceptance and embracing the fact that this guy has to die. I think it's done beautifully in that component, but unfortunately, it's been a theme that's been touched on very well in other films that just wasn't done so as much here. But I still think it was a beautiful effort at it. It was something I think that was profound in some aspects. It would have been nice to get the rest of the movie.
I guess yeah, because it was a shorter version. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a Brad Pitt performance that would have been somewhere between Hugh Jackman here and like Ad Astra probably would have benefited this movie. I don't know.
Interesting.
I think he went too far in Ad Astra, but somewhere in between.
Nothing went too far in Ad Astra. Ad Astra is a fucking masterpiece.
I guess well someday we have to talk about that. Apocalypse Now in space, only not as good.
That's good. I like that. The only two things I was going to say I wanted to add is just that for me, an interesting parallel to this movie, like how I feel about it. It reminds me a lot of how I feel about Peter Jackson's King Kong movie, except not nearly as passionately as I feel about that one. In both cases, you have a director who just came off the heels of a huge success. And even though, like we said, he was going to get this huge budget of like 70 something million dollars to make this movie with Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett, and a whole bunch of different things happened, and that didn't end up happening. They ended up making for like a little over 30,000, I think, or something like that, or 30 million. I'm sorry.
Right.
And changing the actors and the cast and everything, and changing up the story as well to make a much smaller film. It doesn't change the fact that, like, the studio had a lot of faith in him after Requiem, and people were eager to see his next movie, much like the way Peter Jackson was after the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And in both cases, I had this really high expectations for what I wanted to see and what I was expecting to see. And in both cases, I was met with a movie that I really like in a lot of ways. And I have a lot of, I think they're both beautiful movies. And I think that, they both have similar problems. Like they're both, they're both slow in the wrong ways. Peter Jackson's is too long. The Kong movie is too long. And this one is a little too slow for how much story is actually being told, I feel, and stuff like that. But I just, that's just a weird little thing that I kind of find them to be similar in that sense, that they, even though the circumstances for the directors were totally different. And this last thing I wanted to say is really nitpicky, but I do feel like it should be said. It doesn't bother me as much as the other things I said, but it's really dumb. I mean, it's really stupid. I've said this about a lot of movies, but I just feel that, like, when you're making a movie, especially if it's not a straightforward movie, just like a drama about characters or something like that, and whatever, and everything in it's totally realistic or whatever. If you're asking your audience to start accepting some stuff that's not necessarily real, like in this movie, we're talking about a guy who's, like, operating on, experimenting on primates, and he's discovered this, like, incredible thing that's going to change the whole world, probably, you would assume, at least. And not to mention the movie's jumping around to 3 different storylines and within his life and everything, even though one of them is just a story. But you're kind of asking a lot of the audience. Anytime you're doing that in a movie, I think it's really best to just keep things. If something doesn't have to be complicated, don't make it complicated. Don't do something that's completely unnecessary, that's going to make people go, what? And that's something I famously have complained about, the terrible Fantastic Four movie that was made a few years back. But anyway, that's not important. The tombstone at the end of this movie, he refers to his wife, Rachel Weisz's character, as Izzy through this whole movie. Everyone in the world knows that Izzy is short for Isabel. I have the Social Security official website up that tells you how popular names are of every person in this country. There's all sorts of variations of how you would spell Isabel and stuff like that. But I guarantee you that the name Izzi, Izzy, actually being written on her birth certificate and therefore on her tombstone, is so mind-bogglingly low in probability that it's just crazy that they would do that. It's so dumb. Like, you could call her Izzy all you want, but on her tombstone, you say Isabel or Isabella or something, but you don't put Izzi on her tombstone. That's dumb.
She's that kind of gal. She wanted to be very informal even in death. I don't know. Came across in her and the performance.
On the credit in the movie, it's spelled that way too. That is this movie is telling me that her character was named that is her legal name. That's dumb. I mean, that's like if you had a movie where a white woman in America somewhere is named Susan or Sue, not Susan. Her name is not Susan. Her name's Sue. Her parents named her Sue. That's okay. That's been done. But for some reason, her name is spelled S-O-O. Sue. And they never bring it up. It's not like something where they go, "Oh, my parents were just these wacky people," or they couldn't spell right and they wrote that on the birth certificate, and then we just decided to keep it that way. It's not a character thing. It's not a moment they talk about in the movie or nothing. It's like everything else in the movie is totally normal. You're not expected to even dwell on this at all. That character dies at one point, and then suddenly this character you've been calling Sue this entire movie, you see a tombstone and it says Sue Smith or Baker or whatever the heck her last name, Sue, S-O-O. You're like, what? What is that?
On IMDb, she's the character is Isabel Izzy Creo. So I wonder
No,
if
if you click on it, the Isabel is the name of the queen. Just like if you click on I thought that too at first but if you look at the credits when they're rolling on the screen, both her and Hugh Jackman are listed with like 3 or 4 names.
And Hugh Jackman is Thomas, Tommy, and Tom.
Yeah, because of the 3 different timelines. So she's listed in the 2 timelines because she didn't actually play the tree. Although that would have been a really avant-garde choice, in my opinion. Anyway, Isabel is queen
for like the duration of the
Izzy,
shoot.
Izzi Creo is her character's name. Who named that child?
It's possible. I would buy that.
It's an unnecessarily complicated thing to put into a movie about someone turning into a tree.
I guess what they could have done is Isabella for the queen and Isabel for her would have been slightly more realistic.
Yeah.
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 Oh, well.
Or just write Izzy, and then on the tombstone, don't write Isabel or Izzy because that's not realistic.
Yeah, it would have been interesting actually if it was said Isabel, because then it's connecting to the queen character and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we definitely had to have a nitpicky Jason moment. So we got Andrew was waiting for that with Jason. Do you have your list of things that nobody else would think of? I'm actually amazed. I think we should wrap it up with the cinematography rant. We didn't have one, amazingly.
Okay. So I guess that's my cue. I mean, this movie looked fucking gorgeous, and still the thing that has been bothering me since 2006 when this movie came out is when they're ascending toward the star should be, of course, very, very bright, which they got right in the movie. Everything's overexposed. And by the way, this is why we need to keep film alive. This is why we can't just say, hey, just shoot everything fucking digitally because, digital is going to do just fine. No digital camera can handle the amount of overexposure that they were doing with this movie. Still, they're ascending toward a star, which is one light source. And when Rachel Weisz reaches down toward Hugh Jackman's bald head, she's casting multiple sharp, hard shadows of her hand on his head. That is not how things work. I mean, if you're ascending up toward a star, like if you're approaching the sun, I mean, like look at a movie like Sunshine. Actually, one of the biggest problems with Sunshine when it comes to the cinematography is that the light should have actually been softer as they got closer. Because the larger the light source is in relation to the subject, the softer it gets. Yeah. The sun is a hard light source here because the sun is really far away. It's a point source. When you get closer to the sun, it gets really fucking bright, but the actual shadow that it casts becomes softer and softer as you get closer to it. So same thing with the fountain. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense that her head would be casting multiple shadows for obvious reasons because there's only one light source, but also it should be a soft shadow just because they're getting really, really close to a very, very large light source. Again, I forgive it because it looks really fucking beautiful anyway, but anyway, that's my rant.
They probably needed more exposure there. That's why the hard light or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Well,
I
well, they probably didn't have the budget for it because they slashed the budget in half. You put up one, like 100K soft sun, and you're probably good, but they probably couldn't afford it.
I didn't know this
Mm.
until this afternoon after I was done watching the movie. I looked it up. I was incredibly surprised to find out that they didn't really use any CGI in this movie.
Yeah, that
Oh
was
yeah,
pretty awesome.
most of it was like chemical reactions and like petri dishes and micro photography and all that shit.
I find that
Uh,
very interesting.
and that's one of the aspects of the movies that I will always love. I mean, I mean, the funny thing is, knowing that we were going to do this episode, I showed my niece a still image with Hugh Jackman in the bubble, like going up into the nebula, and I asked her, how much of this image do you think was CGI? And she just kind of said, well, probably like 90% of it. And when I told her none, like zero, none of it was CGI, I mean, her jaw just dropped. Uh, and that and the movie does deserve credit for that. Like that it actually went that extra mile to cut the computers out of the process. But yeah,
I kind of
uh,
wonder if like the Mayan temples were miniatures. I assume they must have been.
I think so. I don't know. But yeah.
I did find it interesting. There was a graphic novel that I think came before this. I wonder if the story works better in a graphic novel, but the reviews that I read, they're also mixed. So
I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but I believe it is. I was just reading about that. I guess so. Aronofsky wrote the story back when it was going to have $70 million to make it, and then aside from the cast changing and the budget changing, he changed the story a lot to make it work for the smaller budget. And so there were like apparently story elements that were significantly different. And I guess it said somewhere along the line, I don't know if it was before the movie was made or after the movie was made, but somewhere along the line, someone expressed interest and they took his original story and made a graphic novel out of it, I believe. If that's
Very cool.
oh, like after the fact?
I think so.
Because I read a review that said that it was based on a graphic novel, but it seems like they came out. It was almost like a companion piece type of thing.
Well, it would have been a story that was written. It would have been based off a story that came before the movie. I don't know when the actual thing was published.
Oh, I see. Like maybe it was where he had like a manual, but he didn't publish it until maybe after the movie was
I
made.
have no idea. Yeah, I just know
It seems like they both came out around 2006, from what I saw.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think we should give Andrew the last word.
I don't know how I could top all of that. I think, despite the flaws of the movie, some of the stuff I really appreciate and love about it, of course, is the fact they did so much of it without CGI. It does make this timeless, kind of spooky, interesting sort of feel to those future scenes. But there's just the combination of the things that the movie got right when they all play together beautifully. I think it's just really spectacular. Again, it was a very special experience seeing it the way I did with Matt, and it's something I would have never seen without him. So thank you, Matt. It's something I do. It's a movie I do share with other people. My wife and I actually just watched it even before you guys invited me to do the podcast within the last few weeks, and it was her that wanted to see it again because she remembered the movie. She loves Rachel Weisz in it, and so it's something that really makes an impact on her, and that's somebody who's not like a uber film nerd like the rest of us are. So it's something that does bring a great deal of emotion and I think different things to people. And I think it's something that people should experience. I think it is something that could use a little bit more attention and love for what it did get right.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good execution, and Rachel Weisz does have a very good performance there. So it's good to hear that that even casual viewers are like connect with it. That's something that I personally didn't know. I thought this would be a train wreck for any like non movie buff. Like I just like, cause like I remember like in the theater, like you know, the explosion stuff and everything, and then a few more scenes, and then you go back to the credits over the like the flashing like lights, whatever space explosion. And I was like, what the fuck did I just see? Like I'm imagining most people having that. I had that reaction. So it's like, let alone somebody else. Like they're just like, yeah, like I can only imagine that it was like a huge turnoff for a lot of people. Kind of like how, yeah, like a Serious Man has that ending with the tornado and stuff, and that kind of an ending, or like, oh boy, I can only imagine that the layman person is just like fucking annoyed with this movie right now, as I was actually personally. So, anyways. But yeah, thank you for bringing it. Like I'm glad that that it came from someone else and not from us, because yeah, it just shows. I think that's the verdict, is that like I guess there's more to it than especially I think it sounds like, because I've given it the lowest rating. So it's good to know that this movie has something out there. I hope that a better movie could be made about it. I think it was called The Tree of Life, but I also think that's a flawed movie, and maybe there's an even better movie to be made about
And
it.
how? Never mind.
No, but yeah, no, I think Tree of Life was trying to do similar things, but yeah, I think there's a better movie to be made than either of those. Hopefully, it's made someday before we die.
Yeah.
The whole death theme.
I got it.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating Andrew's input, though. I mean, as a callous, emotionally withdrawn human being, it's nice having somebody come in and give a perspective who isn't a complete sociopath.
I think the term you're looking for, based on what you said earlier, is cinematic masochist.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's if I had to sum it up, it's like an Easter egg with the most gorgeous shell that you can imagine anybody painting on an egg, and then when you crack it open, it's still just a raw egg.
Hmm.
But
Do you
but
guys paint uncooked eggs? I only paint the hard boiled ones.
Like you just changed his life. Wait a second. I guess I could boil them and be less risky to paint them.
Actually, yeah, we usually do hard boiled eggs for Easter, but
Good.
yeah.